dear learners, let us end this chapter with the last topic called Characteristics of Management Principles. Although this topic has come only as a one marker in the past few years, but why not remember it when you can just command it in a minute. So let us see how the principles of management and their characteristics are. You can relate them with the first few letters of the English alphabet as A, B, C, D, E, F, G. There are 7 characteristics depicted in the book. So the first one being A, standing for application. And whenever you talk about application, these are universal in nature. B represents behavioral characteristic. C represents that they are having cause and their effect. D is put in the brackets just to denote that it's not any of the principles starting with the letter D. However, it's a double C. So again there is a C representing contingency, feature of this principles. E represents experimentations. F denotes flexibility, and G represents the principles being just the general guidelines. So you see students, in just a minute you can memorize all these characteristics as A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Now let us see what NCERT has to speak on this topic and what exactly you can write if it comes as a long question in the question paper. Otherwise, this will also help you to identify the one marker as one of the characteristics. So the very first, here you see students on page number 34 of the NCERT, they have depicted all these nature of principles of management, with the first one being applicability. A, as I told you, you must write the applications are universal, which means we can also say that they are pervasive, applying to all kinds of organizations, whether business or non-business, whether small or large, whether public sector or private sector, whether manufacturing or servicing sector. So on all such organizations, these principles are equally applicable in order to ensure efficiency and effectiveness. The second one being B, representing behavioral characteristic of these principles. They are mainly behavioral, you have to write this way, where you can say that these principles, they depend on the behavior of human beings, and therefore they are behavioral in nature. With behavioral, we also mean that there has to be a better understanding between the human and material resources. You see students, in an organization both kinds of resources are required, and there has to be a compatibility between the two. The human resource must be compatible with the physical ones in order to get the work done, and that's why these principles are called behavioral. So this particular line can be taken to form a case-based question on the characteristics of management principles. The third nature being cause and effect relationship of such principles, depicted with the letter C, where we have already discussed the management's nature as a science, and therefore every cause has an effect, and that is how these principles are also, when applied in a particular situation, it would likely to have an effect. The third principle being represented by a D in the brackets, or we call it double C, again with a C, represents contingency nature, where it is said that these principles are dependent on prevailing situations at a particular point of time. At a given situation, in the particular state of time, the managers have to decide that what exactly is to be applied and how the principle has to be molded to suit the particular situation. Now if we call about the next principle, it's E, which represents the experimentations part of this principle. With experimentations, we mean that the managers must exercise due diligence through their observations and practices in order to implement these principles in a better manner. So out of their experience and the collective wisdom, the applicability of these principles can be handled by a particular manager. Then F, representing the next principle with flexibility. So this is very much related to the point discussed above, and we can say that the principles are not at all rigid and they provide absolute freedom to the manager in order to modify these principles according to the situation as per its demand. So this also points towards the contingency feature as well as experimentations feature, where managers are expected to exercise due diligence before their application. So the last one being represented by G, that is nothing but the general guidelines. As we see, these principles just show a general guidelines, and again we can point and relate this feature as management being an inexact science, not a rigid science. The real business situations are highly complex and dynamic, and thereby these principles are also should be adaptable to the given situations, and therefore they are just a general guidelines, a general indications on how to implement, but they do not possess any rigid rules to follow, to be followed by the managers. So I hope this topic is very clear on features of principles of management, where you can learn them as A, B, C, D, E, F, G as a few initial letters of English alphabet, where D, remember students, D is not representing any of the principles, rather D represents double C, one for cause and effect, the other for contingency. So now let's have a quick look on the question that has come up in the past few years on this topic. The question says, principles of management are not. Be careful students, whenever you see such questions, mark these words, negative words, so that you don't err in the answer. Now they have given 4 options and we have to take out the odd one out, which is not one of the characteristics of management principles. So the first option says that they are only applicable in large firms, and this is clearly a contradictory of one of the principles, because we have already read that application of such principles are universal or pervasive in nature, applying to all kinds of organization, whether small or large. However, let us read all the points. The next one says it is based on practice and experience of the managers. This is letter E. Then it also depends on the flexibility as per a particular situation. So it is F. If we say the principles are contingent as well, because they depend on a prevailing situation at a given point of time. So all these characteristics have been covered except the very first one. So the correct option will be first. So now students, let me tell you one more thing, that this is actually a question from the maybe from very back, that maybe in the year 1920. So that there have been very easy options. However, presently there is a trend where you get several options in the answer, like the option A will be like 1 and 4, option B can be like 1, 2 and 3, sometimes they give like this. So you have to have a clear-cut understanding of the concept first of all, so that you don't get perplexed, and secondly you must have a habit of reading the entire question maybe in the reading time or during the time you are attempting that particular question. So never jump into the answers right after reading the first option. You must have a glance over all the options before you write any answer. Thank you.